Appreciate y'all joining this episode of Stuck in the Middle podcast. We are back remotely for this one because it's special. On today's show, we are talking with the creator of Living African podcast. That's right, Living with an Living. While a lot of Africans living in the diaspora and at home want to leave the continent or leave the diaspora, return home, depending on where your current situation in life is, the truth of the matter is that living as an African is certainly an experience on its own, with most of us being able to relate, depending on how our upbringing was. Anyoh is no stranger to that experience, which is why she is using her platform, Living African podcast, to challenge some of those norms and practices that have shaped us for the better or for the worse. Anyoh Fombad is a pharmacist. She's a health economist. And most importantly, she's an African woman who is dedicated to speaking and sparking hard conversations that challenge questions, cultural and societal norms which threaten our well-being, especially as this generation of Africans. I'm excited for this conversation. Anyoh Fombad, welcome to Stuck in the Middle podcast.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That was one heck of an intro.
One take, Jake. It's a bummer that we're not able to do it in the studio. I was really looking forward to treating our audiences, but technology is a blessing, and we're gonna use what we have to create magic here today. How you doing, by the way? How's your mental health? How are you today?
I am doing wonderful. It's the start of a new week.
Yeah.
Things are getting busier as the time goes by, but I am blessed and I can't complain. And how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I would say, the week is, it seems like it's gonna be an interesting one, but I'm ready for it. I wanted to dive right into it. What the heck is a health economist?
So basically, a health economist is someone that keeps the money in your pocket and saves you costs from healthcare. So we all know, obviously, that the highest expenditure, especially in the US and maybe even in the world, it's on healthcare. And so health economics just involves looking for ways that save healthcare costs, and also improves access to healthcare, especially for the people, the marginalized disparities that don't have that access, and also improve health outcomes. So, of course, if you don't have to pay as much money on healthcare services, and if you have easy access to healthcare, then you will definitely save money and your health outcomes will be improved. So that's basically that in a nutshell.
So real quick, I know we're not here to talk about, health economy, but with such a degree or whatever it is as a health economist, what do you work directly for the consumer being, the everyday person who's needing health services and health insurance, or you work with the hospitals? Where do you fall?
You work with, it depends. Like, it's a very broad field, right? And you do a lot of things depending on what degree you have. So I have a master's in health economics. So I can do a whole lot, especially health economists are mostly useful in the pharmaceutical industries. And also that also depends on the health system. Like here in America with our health system, you are involved in pharmacy benefit management, which is basically trying to minimize the cost of drugs and improve health outcomes. So you can actually, as a health economics professional, demonstrate the value proposition of this pharmaceutical products to healthcare providers so that they can use the most optimal medication for their patients at the lowest cost.
So you mentioned you're from Cameroon.
Oh yeah, I am.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 3 siblings, 2 girls.
Where do you fall? You're the middle, first child?
Yeah, I'm second.
Oh, tough. So what part of Cameroon?
I'm the last girl. I'm actually from Bamenda, Northwest Province.
Shout out, Bamenda. Good. When did you move to the States?
My parents have left. Well, I moved about 15 years ago, but my mom especially, she's lived out of the country because she's a medical doctor in the United Nations, and she's lived out of the country probably for many more years than she's in Cameroon. Right now we live in Ethiopia, and we've lived in Ethiopia for about 16 years right now. So
you're in Ethiopia right now?
No, I'm in Texas.
Oh, okay. Texas. If I had $1 every time somebody thought I was Ethiopian, I'd be Elon Musk right now.
Yeah. You actually look Ethiopian. You look like a brother.
Denarish?
Yeah.
What's your story though? What's your story like? How did you, I know you immigrant, first generation immigrant. I don't know, depending on when your mom and dad moved here, but what's your story like? How did you come to be, I know from about who you are today?
Oh my goodness. My story has definitely not been who I am today or where I am was not planned at all. I don't even know. Like, I mean, growing up in Africa, our parents actually, they gave us that freedom to choose whatever we wanted to be, of course, with a little bit of sense. Because I mean, growing up in Cameroon without that foundation, you don't want to be a dancer, or you don't want to be like a singer per se, because it wasn't something that was
looked upon as to say, yeah.
It wasn't something that, there weren't even services to encourage that kind of dream. You know what I mean? Even though actually I wanted to be a dancer.
It depends what kind of dance,
Right. That's true. That's funny. But at least our parents gave us that exposure. We always went to like seminars, music seminars. We had music instruments at home, the piano, and we really tried to explore different things from our skills. We even went to like hair do classes. We learned how to sew, we learned how to play tennis and everything. But my parents actually is science-based. My family is science-based, and my mom is a medical doctor, as I told you, and my dad actually was a PhD researcher. So automatically, children always want to be what their parents are. They're always inspired by their parents. So we were kind of indirectly cautioned, not cautioned, but trained in that field. Not that they intentionally did that, but just from us watching them. So when I moved to America after high school, I actually wanted to be a pharmacist. I knew I wanted to be a pharmacist. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor, unlike my sister, because I just could not stand blood. So yeah, I became a pharmacist about 6 years ago. And I knew for sure I did not want to. I kind of knew what I did not want, but I probably did not know what I wanted.
Yeah.
I definitely knew what I didn't want. I didn't want to be a retail pharmacist. I have mad respect for them, but I just felt like it wasn't for me. I wasn't built for that. So I decided to go into managed care, which at that time wasn't really as popular in pharmacy school. And I actually experienced that through a rotation. And managed care was something which is also synonymous to pharmacy benefit management. And that includes, just looking for ways to save costs of healthcare and improve outcomes. And that's where I was introduced to health economics. So down the road, when I was working as a pharmacist, I went back to school full-time to pursue a master's in science and health economics. I had already achieved a master's and MBA with my PharmD degree. So it really came all around full circle, especially considering my story and how far I've come. Coming from Africa, access to healthcare is a very big concern and issue since when we were younger till now, and that also has to do with the lack of affordability. So all those things, at least, even though I'm not in Africa, if I am in America and I'm able to look for ways that other people in my community could save costs and improve the outcomes of their healthcare, then at least that brought me fulfillment. So that's where I am right now, and that's professionally. But I kind of say I do that to the side because I basically am kind of more focused like on my own personal goals, my own personal dreams, which had always been to like create a platform where I can impact my own community where I come from, at least even with the distance. So, excuse me, even with the distance. So with the podcast, I feel like I can impact a lot of people, have a broader outreach to really bring up these topics that are usually otherwise swept under the rug for us to have that conversation. They're uncomfortable conversations, they're hard conversations, but I want us to have these conversations and spark this, discussions among our communities and our circles and just do better by each other.
How long have you had that urge? How long has that been a thing where you like, we have to have these conversations? This is the thing that's plaguing our society, and somebody has to step up and create these platforms to bring change.
Right. So actually, I had that revelation of creating a podcast last year, but I've always had that urge, because I always have these conversations. I always have these discussions, even with my parents, my siblings, my friends. My mom has traveled to so many. I mean, she's traveled to almost every continent in the world, through work, and she has had that exposure and had a lot of experience seeing people suffering, seeing, dealing with this, the disparities that have several communities. So we always have these meaningful conversations, especially at home. And we always hear these stories. I mean, you go to social media, you see almost every day there's a story of either domestic abuse victim that's dying or people committing suicide. Like this,
just saw one today, but that is,
you don't even have to look far away. There's so much around us that we have to talk about. So, I mean, we have these discussions loosely, but I wanted to really create a platform where we can actually come together and have these discussions in a meaningful way and not loosely, and this is something that will hopefully stay online for a very long time, where people can always come back to have access to it. And so far, we've had 5 episodes, but there's actually more to come.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, and is that why you chose a podcast, a medium to drive these conversations, to being able to house it as quote unquote an archive where people can revisit? Did you think of any other ways by which you can host this conversations, these discussions?
Yes, definitely. I mean, right now I'm working on my YouTube channel, which I eventually want to also release the videos. And I have a couple of dreams, which of course will be unraveled with time. Everything is a slow process. So I want to do like live videos as well. I even want to eventually come up with, and this is hopefully, knock on wood, nothing happens, to interrupt that, but, even have like conferences and have talks. And even, eventually with the growth of my platform, if I could potentially even be a speaker at different occasions, and just expand my outreach, that will be something that I definitely look forward to.
I'm curious, why the name Living Africa? Living, Living Africa.
Right. So, the original name for this podcast, it was supposed to be This African Life. That was the original name. And so I don't know if you know the podcast, This American Life.
Yes.
And, that's under Serial.
Yes.
And they have all these discussions, just stories about people in America. So I wanted it to reflect this African life, but unfortunately that was actually taken, and that was a huge bummer. And I was like, I wanted something that reflects just life in Africa, regardless of where it is, at home or in the diaspora, like life that Africans actually experience. Our story is very unique. Especially the Africans in America, we have the African American experience in America, or at least in the West. And then we actually have that experience, because when someone sees us walking on the road, they don't look at us as an African, right? They look at us as a Black person, which here is African American. So, we have both experiences. So I really wanted to use that platform to highlight all the experiences that we have, but giving that, spotlight to the experiences within our community in Africa, especially because that's where our foundation was built.
What challenges did you run into as far as like getting off the ground? You know what I mean? Like you mentioned, it was a dream from last year. What challenges did you, if any, run into getting it off the ground?
Yeah. As you know, I'm still a baby in this podcast game, and it was such a huge challenge, honestly. I'm the kind of person that when I'm doing something, if I don't connect with something, I won't do it, number one. And if I don't connect with the process, I will not do it. And I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, which is good and not too good, because it's like some people just start and then they polish up with time. But I usually want to take that time to polish 90% of the things that I want to do before I start, you know what I mean? And, that means putting a lot of pressure on myself and like having sleepless nights. So there were a lot of challenges. But the first thing I did was, I know I was coming to this game as a new person. So I took a couple of classes. I went to Udemy. I took how to, start a podcast.
Hey.
I actually took how to edit a podcast, but eventually I took a whole academy, a whole series of courses with this guy. And actually it was very helpful because he went in depth on what happens behind the scenes and how to plan, basically giving a guideline from the launch day till, subsequent days and subsequent episodes, and how to structure everything. And then, I didn't really want to put too much pressure on me, because I look at this as well as an investment, because I hope that someday I kind of monetize it and start, having, when I have a broader platform. And so I actually work with a production team that I pay, and they produce my podcast for me, which makes life extremely easy, because I have other projects. This is not the only thing that I'm doing, actually. I mean, in addition to my full-time job, I have about 3 other projects which I'm working on, and I will release them with time. But there's still, a lot of issues that I have and stuff like that.
Man, listen, if y'all listening, just take notes. Get educated and find a team. She's doing it the right way. You heard, she is doing it the right way. I want to get into it because I'm saying, no time to waste. People, your podcast is very, very needed. It's very, very needed. And you mentioned earlier that your parents were kind of I'm gonna say the anomaly, letting y'all be free, which is a dope thing. Did you see in your community growing up, both back home and here in the diaspora, where that wasn't the way other people raise their kids, giving them that freedom? And how did that shape your understanding of society and who you are today, and how you felt about the situation then?
Oh my goodness, definitely. When I grew up, the environment that I grew up, it was actually in a small village, and that's just because we went there because my dad, it was a research center, right? So my dad was working there, and we had to stay there for a few years. But, I could already tell that we were different. Not necessarily in class per se, because actually our house was open to everybody. People in the village, the members of everybody loved my mom. I mean, we always make fun of my mom, telling her that she's Miss Charity, because every single person loved my mother, my parents. Even at church, we were very active. My parents started by making sure that we were, humility was instilled in us, number one. So we did not really look ourselves as different in terms of class, but I definitely knew that my parents were not raising us the same as the other people I knew. And I really had this realization when we went to boarding school. With boarding school, you have a bigger exposure. You learn about your friends, and you learn about their upbringing, and then you go visit them and you see certain things. So, the stories my friends told me, you'd see friends they're talking about how their parents discipline them, or, when, you go to visit your friend, and it's when their parents come, it's everyone is running away, and everyone is just fixing everything and stuff. It's their parents literally scared them away, but that was never really the case with my parents. And I can never forget. This was actually when I was in primary school. One of my friends, she was living with her parents, her aunt actually. And I don't know what she did. She did something very minor, and her aunt came and got her well beaten, in front of me. That traumatized me. I can never forget. I can never forget that memory. And it just made me wonder, why are these parents always yelling at their kids? Why are these parents always beating their kids? I knew we were different, because I could not relate to that, but that did not mean that we were not getting disciplined. My parents actually disciplined us. And back then, I kind of low-key envied my friends who were, beaten, because I'm oh yeah, you just get a whooping and that's it. But my parents, they always seemed to drag their own discipline, which was so annoying. And we had to tell them eventually, because they make you sit down, think about what you did, and tell them what you did, and if you understand why it was wrong and what you can do to change it. So that's like a whole class, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is so annoying, and just whoop me and cut to the chase and let's be done with this, But as I have grown up, I came to realize that these discussions, these things were always very important, and they have molded me to how I see life, because it's not just about disciplining the child. The child will just know that, oh yeah, I can do anything and I would just be beaten and that's it, And also, even when we had family members come home and they were trying to do a few things to us, like I told my mom, like one day, like when I started hitting my puberty, my auntie pulled me to the corner and she was like, oh yeah, I have to pound your breast, because if I pound your breast, your breasts will get bigger like my children's. And I'm like, no, go ask my mother. I'm like, that's not true, by the way, but go ask my mother if you want to do it. And that's where the discussion ended, So my parents actually encouraged us to be very vocal and not to be afraid of anybody, because, and they made sure that they knew us and we knew them. So I definitely know that my mom would not be okay with this. So go ask her. If she's okay with that, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I definitely knew, and that's, most of my aunties especially were not always comfortable with that. They always thought, especially me, they thought I was very vocal and very, they consider it bold or disrespectful, but that's just how my parents encouraged us to talk.
And that's in the in the topic of communication in the African household, which is episode 3 and 4, I believe, in your podcast right now. Talk about that, man, because I'll be honest to say I don't have the best of communications when it comes to my relationship with some of my elders. You know what I mean, like family members. How do we tackle that? How do we address that? Even just going back to your aunt and make, what I'm saying, like have that understanding, like, yo, I can come to you, auntie, with certain topics, or I can come to you, mom or dad, and we just have a conversation as an adult and a child, mom and dad, mom and daughter, father and son. Saying like communication within the African household. How do we address that? Because it's not the best for most people.
Yeah, it's not the best. So in an African household, right, the adult in that in that scenario has to encourage that communication, right? In my own case, when my parents had those discussions with us, they always gave us the floor to express ourselves. They asked us, like, is there anything that you want to talk about? Is there anything that you feel which I did or which I said which wasn't right or which hurt your feelings that you want to express yourself about? So when an adult encourages that two-way communication, then it makes it easier for the child to communicate, right? So because the child at that point is a more vulnerable population. So I feel like that communication has to start with the adult and then goes to the child. So if you grew up in an environment where you were encouraged to speak up, then maybe your communication will be better than it already is, which I think you're pretty good at communicating. But this is just an ideal hypothetical situation, But if a child grew up in an environment that he or she has always been suppressed, then even when they have the floor to communicate, they will not be able to communicate. And that's what we're going to see in my next episode coming up about the rape culture, which is dropping on Wednesday. This girl was very much suppressed to the point that even as an adult, if someone told her that she did something which she did not do, she will not defend herself because she'd always been accused falsely and she'd always been suppressed. So I feel like that environment of communication has to be cultivated primarily by the adult and encouraged. And to encourage the children or the younger ones to communicate.
Talk about domestic abuse, because that's episode 1 and 2 outside of your intro, and something that's also very prevalent in our society as Africans. Just so today on Betatin's, one of Cameroon's leading media houses, another lady losing her life to domestic abuse.
Yes, I just saw that. I was, every time I see a story of domestic abuse, it's like my heart just breaks because this is another soul lost. And I wouldn't even say only women, because domestic abuse actually happens in men. About over 700,000 men actually go through domestic abuse, and my heart just breaks for that, because I feel like not only the immediate environment or the upbringing of that person contributes to that situation. And when I say that person, actually I should say those people, because the abuser and the victim, their upbringing definitely contributes to them being in that situation. In terms of the abuser, of course, maybe he believes that women are supposed to be disciplined by beating, or he probably saw, his parents, his mom being abused, or maybe his dad being abused or something. Or maybe he just did not have that guidance. He saw his friends or his friends' parents getting abused. And then for the woman in that situation, maybe she saw her parents are probably still together, and she saw that, hey, it's okay if a woman is disciplined that way. The man still loves you as long as he gives you this, or as long as he takes care of you. Or on the other hand, maybe the victim actually wants to leave, but they don't have another alternative, which, brings light to poverty in Africa, because a lot of women or a lot of victims, they stay in abusive relationships because of poverty. They cannot afford a life by themselves. Like, they're so used to a specific lifestyle, or actually they're just not even used to, but they just cannot afford a life by themselves. So they tend to depend on the other victim, who takes advantage of them and their safety, of course. Because I don't think any abuser plans on killing the victim, right? But then if you lay hands on someone, expect the worst outcome. So that's something that we as a community really have to have these conversations, and we have to be supportive. Like in the episodes of my podcast about abuse, a few recommendation and action steps that I gave, I encouraged us to listen, because the whole goal is, if you're a safe space for someone, they will confide in you. But, it's very common in our community for us to badmouth each other, for us to betray even our closest people, because jealousy or just spite or something, So I feel like it's time that we become more welcoming to each other. We become more understanding and tolerant of each other, and non-judgmental. We are so judgmental in the African community, and that's what's killing us, because a woman or man in a domestic abusive situation may want to seek help even from a family member or a confidant, but they just don't trust that person because they feel like they're going to be judged and stuff like that. So I feel like we need to be more understanding of what each other is going through. And I don't think it's even our place to give advice, because sometimes advice can be biased or based on our perspective, but we can give them help or guidance on where to seek help or what to do in terms of like how to keep themselves safe, but not necessarily advising them on the dynamics of the relationship, because as long as we're not part of that relationship, we will never understand what actually is going on in the relationship.
You mentioned episode coming up on Wednesday here, rape culture, another big, topic and issue needing addressing in our community. What's one thing you learned from the guest, and one thing that you just learned that you can, preview for listeners coming Wednesday?
I learned so much. My goodness. Actually, the guest, she has a book.
Okay.
So her name is Mani Anaber, and her book is Cactus in a Calabash. Like, if you want to cry but learn, though, you should, get the book. It's unbelievable. She's actually Cameroonian. I learned so many things. I mean, at the end of the next episode, which is in 2 weeks, I'm going to share a lot of the things that I learned. But a few things that I learned is parents have to be very vigilant about who they let their kids around and who they let around their kids. That is extremely, extremely important, because this girl was actually raped anally and vaginally for 4 years by the houseboy multiple times a day in the house, even when her parents and everyone was there. And she tried so many times to tell her parents, but the boy manipulated the parents, who actually encouraged her to discipline, in quotes, her, but they didn't know that he was also disciplining her by raping her. And 4 years later, that's when they discovered. So imagine how her childhood was messed up. And he was not only sexually abusing her, he was torturing her and her siblings. So parents have to be very vigilant about who they let their kids around and who they let around your kids. And also parents have to watch and listen. Our African parents do not listen to the children. I mean, adults in general don't listen. And that comes back to communication. They have to create that safe space, because once this girl was shut out the very first time, she never ever told her parents about this abuse again. So as adults and as parents and as the elderly family members, we have to encourage a safe space for the younger ones to communicate with us. And that definitely requires us to be humble. We have to break out that ego, like I'm the older one, and come down to their level and really understand them and listen to what they're saying and believe them. A child will not just make up certain things that, are weird or strange. They come from somewhere, so those are basically the two main things that I have really learned. And of course, a bonus is therapy. Therapy is okay. We have to start normalizing therapy in the African community. We do not believe in therapy. We believe in doing and taking care of everything by ourselves. We believe in manning up or womaning up, but we should seek therapy. Therapy is very important, and I will be talking about that as well in the upcoming episodes.
Yeah, therapy is not going to the nearby, Ngumba house. Therapy is not, saying, like doing the traditionals and every other thing that has not worked for centuries. Therapy is not doing any of those things. Therapy is going to a professional and seeking help.
And not even therapy as well. I want to make something very clear. Therapy is not going to your pastor. Mm-hmm. No, your pastor is your spiritual guide, is your spiritual, guide, basically. You have to go to a psychotherapist, like someone who is trained professionally. If your pastor is professionally trained in psychotherapy, then yes. Or maybe family marriage therapy or whatever. But a lot of us as Africans, we consider our spiritual counselor as a therapist, for mental health issues, which is extremely rampant in our community. And I just wanted to really clarify that, because going to your pastor for a mental health issue is definitely, you cannot cure mental health with prayers. I mean, prayers help you to bring you
and night vigils and sowing seeds of $2,000 and
you have to go to a professional therapist.
I want to talk about, it's just the dynamics of the podcast is fresh. We want to give the audience, potential audience, and, the day one fans, an inside look at the podcast. Do you plan on opening the door to outsiders who is strictly Africans as far as guests are concerned?
In the long run, actually, I will open the door to outsiders, because the outsiders that I will open the door to obviously will be those that could either shed light on certain issues that, Africans that are prominent in the African community. So let's just say, for example, certain professionals that are not maybe common in the African community or accessible in the African community, or at least certain people. I mean, I actually have an episode planned with, for us to really connect with our African-American brothers, right, and sisters, so it's definitely going to be for the most part for Africans, and by us, obviously, but I definitely will open the doors to other ethnicities who will share their light. And as I did all of this, I've come to realize that our cultures and traditions in Africa are not that different from the Asian community.
Oh yeah, facts.
You know what I mean? Like we have like a lot of parallels. Like it's unbelievable. Like the whole thing about, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be an engineer or pharmacist, or, the whole respect, you don't talk back to your elders, you don't, all those doctrines are basically similar. So I really hope that this podcast, even though it states African, is basically addressing issues that are in every ethnic group. And I hope that it helps the people out there as well. I have a couple of African-American friends who actually benefit a lot from the podcast. So
yeah, definitely. How would you describe your interview style? How would you describe how you approach conversations? I would say the preface that I feel like this pod, just from listening to the episodes out already and the episodes to come, especially the one from Wednesday, it's like you can't be listening to this joint before you go to, like to a happy, you got to be in here's a heavy weighty topics.
Yes, they're very heavy. So, I mean, how I do it is before, I mean, of course, I reach out to the guests, and once they accept, I give them, and I mean, of course, this guest, must have, like touched me in one way or the other for me to reach out to them, or, so I actually reach out to them, and then once they accept, I give them a list of questions that I would like them to answer, so they can think about it, because I really want a lot of substance, on these topics as well, So I reach out. I mean, I typically communicate with my guests maybe at least 2 times before the interview, and we just discuss and break the ice and try to see how comfortable they are with my questions, and if they want to switch a few things around and stuff like that. So, and then once we get to the interview, of course, I have the housekeeping, in the interview, and then we start the recording, and it just flows. It flows.
Well, real quick, what is one thing that you've learned on the go that you didn't know while planning, like, hey, I'm going to start Living African podcast? What's one thing that you've just learned in this short time of launching that you're like, dang, I ain't prepared for that?
Right. Let me see.
One thing that we do differently from you is we never share the questions with the guests. We just want it to be there's no right or wrong way to do it, and we just book guests. We book guests, I think 2 months in advance. When we started, we were scrambling like, dang, we got to tape on Saturday. We don't have a guest yet, but the team is augmented now. We have guests booked all the way to June. So
yeah.
But what's one thing that you've learned? You're like, dang, I ain't prepared for that. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I wasn't expecting to be impacted by the stories that I listened to. I mean, at one point I was like, dang, I need therapy myself. I mean, I go to therapy, but I've spoken to a couple of people, like they've shared a couple of heavy stories with me, and I'm like, woof, this is tough. This is really tough. Like I knew I was going to bring up discussions and talk about these issues, but I wasn't ready for how the issues will impact me, because I'm an empath. And so that really hit me. But of course, with the technical struggles with the podcast, I mean, I'm still learning. I consider myself a baby and a learner. And of course, I mean, I will learn from you guys as well. And I hope you guys do same from me. I mean, I feel like we're collectively doing something to help our community, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, I wanted to flip the script a little bit, and this is a question that AK, shout out to AK, he's producing, he's in the background right now. This is a question he would ask. What would you say to the people in our community who say, hey, listen, this is how we've been raised, this is our norms, this is our traditions, who want to hold fast to these ways of thinking, ways of doing things, and just to address rape culture, to address the way we communicate, to address domestic abuse, to address everything else that is for the worst, shaping us to not be the best of us as Africans, both in the continent and in the diaspora. What do you say to those people who want to hold on to those things, or who otherwise are just like, listen, I'm stuck in my ways?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, because I was having this discussion with my mom last night. And I was just talking about their generation, because that's kind of how their generation are, right? Like they want to hold on to those old school ways. But 2 things I want to say: times are changing. And the second thing I want to say is just have an open mind. If you don't have an open mind, you will not be able to keep up with the times, because times are changing, and changing really fast. So that's actually what I have to say.
Times are changing, and they're changing really fast. Get with the program.
Yeah, you gotta get
advice.
I mean, we don't have a choice. We don't have with the social media age and everything, there's so much exposure. Like even people back in Africa, even their children back in Africa have equal exposure as we do here. So, I mean, times are changing. Get with the program and just keep an open mind, and you'll be good.
I advise for young, men and women, both in the continent and the diaspora right now. You've dropped a lot of gems in our conversation, but just advise to them as they traverse this, difficult mode, because we still have a mode that we need to live by. Doctor, engineer, lawyer, you're a disgrace. You know what I mean? Both in the continent, and in the diaspora, advice for them as they just look to, take advantage of technology, take advantage of innovation, and take advantage of everything that the world is giving us right now to just be the best versions of themselves, mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally.
Yes. You know, I before I give that advice, I just want to talk briefly about what basically will inspire my response. And this is regarding there's two stories that I know. I mean, there's more obviously, but like a few days ago, we had a Cameroonian boy who killed his mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like a couple of months back here in Houston, you had this Nigerian kid who killed the mother because she yelled at him to get a job, right? So I just want to talk to the upcoming generation that, number one, be patient with yourself and be patient with your elders, because these are people who live in a different time. These are people who have different doctrines. They grew up with a different foundation. And it's obvious that, I mean, for a majority of the elders that are here, that moved from Africa and are here, they're also trying to keep up with the time. I know I said, keep up with the program and times are changing, but of course, we don't expect them to just be that fast and that quick in, adapting to the changing times. But then some children may not understand, so I feel like it's supposed to be a partnership with their elders as well. Like they, especially at an age where they're already adults, just be patient with your parents, be patient with the elders, and be patient with yourself. In that, I mean, because with the social media age, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of comparison. You always feel like you're not doing as much. You're not where you were supposed to be when you look at your friend, but just look at what the good things that you have and just try to be patient and trust the process. I mean, times are changing really fast, but the process is slow. If you want to be successful, you cannot be successful in a second. Things seem to change. And actually, things are not necessarily what they seem to be, especially on social media. So don't get carried away. Just be patient with yourself, stay in your lane, and be patient with your elders as well.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, I like to say it's a marathon, not a sprint, especially with everything that we try to do. The sprint is saturated, but a marathon isn't. So pace yourself and be patient. I like that. That's dope advice. Listen, I really enjoyed this conversation. There's much more we can talk about, but just wanted to get to know you. New pod on the block. It's called Living African Podcast, hosted by I'm gonna butcher your name. Anyoh Fombad. I was about to say Funya. She's doing the thing. She did her research. She didn't just jump in the game. You know what I'm saying? She's landed and she is running heavy topics. It's right now. Where can people find it? Plug everything.
Right. Well, it's pretty much in every platform that you listen to podcasts. We're still working on the YouTube platform. We're having a few issues, but Spotify.
Listen, that background right there, that's your YouTube right there.
Oh, it is. Well, I guess I'm sitting in my kitchen right now.
That is your YouTube. I'm like, yo, I have a YouTube channel. I'm like, that joint right there is the background. You don't need.
Yeah, I like sitting to do my podcast. This is my kitchen actually, and that's like just below the stairs. So, well, I guess.
Yeah. Are you married?
Yes, I am.
Kids or no kids?
No kids yet.
Sorry, yo. I know because I'm asking for the brothers. This is truly asking for a friend. We have friends of the pod who always make sure I ask those questions when we have sisters or brothers. So I gotta get it out the way so people not speculating or hitting me up in my DM. So sorry.
Well, I'm taken, unfortunately, actually.
Yes.
Yes, but you can reach me. You can reach me at the website www.livingafricanpodcast.com. Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Overcast. My podcast is worldwide. Actually.
Yeah. Type it in Google, Living African. It pops right up. The website, the landing page is beautiful. You did some amazing work. Appreciate you joining us and breaking everything down.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys reaching out. This is actually my first interview as a guest. So
Yeah, and I apologize. I apologize for the short notice. Usually we like to give people, time in advance. I hit you up Saturday. I was like, you ready?
Yeah. Well, I
So
appreciate that. I really, I think you guys are doing a great job as well. And I'd encourage everyone to, actually, listen to your podcast as well. And hopefully we can partner in the future. I mean,
yeah, for sure. One of the questions I didn't get to is, I know you're an advocate for mental health, and we are as well. So, post pandemic, once everybody's vaccinated or whatever the situation, that we can partner up. We every October we host a mental health live show here in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. So maybe we can come down to Houston, help host one, or you and bring you over and you help host one. So we'll definitely stick it. Yeah, definitely.
That's a great
Hey,
idea.
listen. If you enjoy what you heard, what you listened to, definitely review the show. Leave a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. Let us know what you want us to ask Anyoh, or just reach out to her, ask her directly yourself. Review the show, do screenshots, send it to everybody in your networks. This is Stuck in Middle Podcast. If you want to write for us, hit us up on the website, sitmpodcast.com. You want to be a sponsor, hit us up on the website, all that great stuff. Shout out to the whole team, Ma, Tutu, Charles, Achiri, Inez, AK in the background right now producing. I am your host, Reflex. And shout out especially to guests who advocated for this particular episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the next one. Peace.